Hello friends and welcome to this video on Authentic English, and in this video we are going to discuss the story A Gorilla in the Guest Room by animal activist, zookeeper and writer Gerald Durrell. So first of all, let's talk a little about Gerald Durrell. He was a zookeeper and he deeply loved animals. Okay, so most of the things that he has written are about his experiences with animals and wildlife. And he was born in India. He was born in Jamshedpur in British India. Okay, so and then of course he's a British writer, if you want to consider him a writer, but his main occupation was that of a zookeeper, and he was also a naturalist and an animal activist. So Gerald Durrell has written most of the stories and books about animals. Okay, and this story is no exception. You can of course see that this story is about a gorilla who happens to be in a guest room or a drawing room. So the title of the story is so funny. If you look at the title of the story, A Gorilla in the Guest Room, this is so awkward, so weird and so outlandish. You never experience a gorilla sitting in the guest room. At most, people have animals like dogs and cats in their houses, but a gorilla is scarcely and rarely seen. So this story is going to be about a gorilla. Okay, maybe a pet gorilla who, we can infer at least this much from the title, that the story is going to be about a gorilla that may be living in some house, and that is why he happens to be in a guest room. Okay, and so this is about Gerald Durrell. So the story was written around 1962, and the story tells about the relationship between a gorilla and a human. So first of all, let me tell you that Gerald Durrell was a zookeeper. Okay, and he now thought that there would be a requirement of animals who would add to the wildlife. Okay, he just did not want the animals in the zoo to be put on display and people coming and watching them, but he wanted to showcase wildlife. He did not just want animals to get showcased in the zoo. He was a zookeeper. Okay, so story is a non-fiction story, and most probably tells the real experiences of his life. So that since he was a zookeeper, he decided that he should bring in some animals that he can actually take care of and that actually would add to the wildlife. Okay, a zoo should not only be putting animals on display and people are coming and just watching them. So what happens is that an animal dealer calls the narrator. So I'm now going to discuss the summary of the story. An animal dealer calls the narrator asking him to adopt a baby gorilla. Okay, so since his zoo wanted something like a gorilla, something like wildlife which could be conserved and which would actually make people more aware of the duties toward animals. So what happens is that an animal dealer calls the narrator asking him to adopt a baby gorilla. The narrator, being convinced that the African government is not being able to save gorillas and they may soon get extinct, decides to accept the gorilla for a sum of £1,200. A piece he feels is reasonable for a baby gorilla. So what happens is that this animal dealer offers him a baby gorilla for £1,200, and now our narrator, that is a writer, is convinced that the African government, speaking of politically about it, is too much concerned in its own affairs, and it's going to be the last priority of the government to think about gorillas and wildlife. And if this continues, the gorillas would get extinct in the time to come. So seeing this, he definitely decides, and being an animal lover, a zookeeper, of course his heart is that of an animal lover, he decides to immediately adopt a gorilla, and he thinks that £1,200 is the right money for a small baby gorilla. Okay, the narrator is however afraid that the baby gorilla may turn out to be a baby chimpanzee. So this is a little humorous, that he thinks that the baby gorilla may turn out to be a baby chimpanzee, because most animal dealers are not able to distinguish between the two in their infancy because they look almost the same. So he thinks that he wants to invest £1,200 on a gorilla only. He does not want a chimpanzee. Okay, so he accepts the offer despite being in loan himself. So he does not have the money to buy the gorilla at the present moment, but he still accepts the invitation. So this shows his love for animals, his sacrifice. Okay, he's so fond of animals that he decides to save them at any cost. He does not have the money but still agrees to buy it. The narrator, however, doesn't have enough money at the moment. His wife rebukes him for accepting the proposal even when he doesn't have money. So his wife raises concern over his decision, that why did you accept the proposal when you did not have money? Okay, and then there's also the probability of the gorilla turning out to be a chimpanzee. So his wife, whose name is Jackie, okay, Jackie or Jackie, Jacquie, is concerned. She does not like this decision. Now, to console his wife, he tells his wife he'll ask rich men. So he is, I think, living in a place called Jersey, and he tells his wife. You can confirm this in the book. Once he tells his wife he'll ask rich men of the island to pay for it. So he says that he'll crowdfund the money. He says that since he does not have the money to buy the gorilla, he's not going to invest it out of his own pocket. Instead, he's going to ask a lot of people from the town, from the place he was living, to invest money, and if a little sum is left, then maybe he'll add to it. So he says that he'll crowdfund it. Okay, and what happens is that he now calls one of his colleagues called Hope. Okay, so he calls a man called Hope and asks him to give him a list of rich men in the island whom he may ask for money to buy the gorilla. So what happens is this man called Hope takes about 30 minutes and gives him a list of all the rich people in town, okay, whom he may contact to get the money to buy the gorilla. He calls up the first person who agrees to give a small amount. So first person agrees to give a small amount. By lunch, he is able to collect 200 pounds. Okay, so what happens is as time passes, he is able to collect more and more money. By lunch time, he is able to collect 200 pounds. So now only 1000 pounds are remaining because the gorilla was agreed to be bought at 1200 pounds. The next person, Major Domo, agrees to pay 1000 pounds. And now there is this unknown person. This person is someone whom the narrator, whom Gerald Durrell does not know. So he thinks that it would be very strange to ask an unknown man for so much money, but very shockingly and very surprisingly, Major Domo agrees to pay the $1000 that were remaining to help Durrell buy the gorilla. So now what happens is that he goes to London to buy the gorilla. Okay, so he has to leave for London, and he's also scared that the gorilla may turn out to be a chimpanzee. He thinks that all of his efforts will be wasted if the gorilla is only a chimpanzee. And one of the most important things in the story is the fact that in the beginning of the story, he has raised his doubts about animals getting extinct. Okay, so he has written that 3 fat volumes without insects means there were that contained a list of animals which had become extinct. So animal extinction is a major theme or major issue that is raised in this humorous kind of story. Now what happens is that when he goes to London, of course he's very scared that the gorilla may turn out to be a chimpanzee, but then he finds that it's actually a gorilla that is being offered, and the gorilla's name is Npongo. Okay, so very kind a very atypical name. Npongo is the name of the gorilla, and he's a very healthy gorilla. Okay, he does not have any fat on him, and he's very lean, very healthy, and very muscular, and he weighs a lot. Okay, so he's a heavy, healthy gorilla, and the narrator Gerald Durrell is very happy to receive him. Now they don't have a cage ready. Now what happens is that they return to their own place, and now since the narrator does not have a cage ready for the gorilla, he decides to keep the little baby gorilla in his guest room. And initially the wife and the mother are afraid, but the gorilla ultimately is liked by all. So what happens is that this gorilla, is a very good kind of a gorilla. Initially he does not disturb anything that is there in the guest room. He just admires everything, he just looks at them, but he does not kind of break many things. But however, as time passes, he also, of course, he's a baby gorilla, so he does not know all the manners as is written in the text. Of course, you see that the animal is treated like a baby, a real human being. Okay, so what happens is that this gorilla breaks the lock, breaks the door handle, and kind of dirties the floor. Okay, so it causes a little damage in the house, very little damage as compared to a chimpanzee, and he's definitely a good gorilla. So now as time passes, he grows up, and as time passes, he grows up. And let me tell you one more thing, that there was a chimpanzee called Chumley whom Gerald Durrell had made a pet before, or maybe he was there at a zoo, and He was also kept at his house, and Chumley had caused a great deal of nuisance at his house. But Pongo was not at all like Chumley, the chimpanzee. And Pongo was a very good gorilla. He was very civil as for a baby. Now he decides to find a partner for the gorilla. As the gorilla grows up, he decides to find a partner for him, because it is very important to give company to an animal, especially to an ape, because loneliness can be very bad for them. They can become very hostile and very rebellious. They can start attacking human beings if they are suffering from depression and loneliness. So as he grows up, as he becomes about 11 to 12 years old, a need for a partner arises, and Gerald Durrell contacts the dealer to find a female gorilla, and then the animal dealer tells him about a man who can sell a female gorilla younger to Pongo for 1500 pounds. So a female gorilla is bought whose name is Nandi. Okay, or you can call him Nandi if you want to talk about it in an Indian way. So the female gorilla is Nandi, which he purchases in installments for 1500 pounds. So 1500 pounds is the cost of Nandi, and Nandi is more expensive than this Pongo. But you have to mind it that Nandi is a bigger gorilla. Okay, and now she's not an infant. The female gorilla is Nandi, which he purchases in installments for 1500 pounds. Nandi is scared at first and has scars on her fur. So she is a docile kind of a gorilla. Okay, she's scared at first. Probably she has been harmed a little by her previous master, and she has a scar on her head. Okay, so she's a little afraid of human beings. And now what happens is that Gerald Durrell decides to keep her in a separate cage. And initially, both Nandi and Pongo do not like each other. They do not show interest in each other. But soon things change and they become friendly. Pongo what happens is that Nandi enters Pongo's cage one day, and Pongo pulls Nandi's hair and asserted himself. So his masculine aggression is there. He kind of tries to dominate Nandi. The two were served fruits, and then slowly it all becomes kind of easy, and the two become friends. The two were served fruits which both ate without caring for each other. So the two were served fruits on the plate which the two ate without caring for each other, but soon they became friends. When Durrell was having a party at home, he got to know that the gorillas caught diarrhea, but the two managed to combat the disease. He also found out that when he was throwing a party at his house, that the gorillas have caught diarrhea, but then soon they managed to combat this disease. And now, as time passes, Gerald meets a BBC man to make a documentary on the two gorillas. So Gerald Durrell meets a BBC documentarist to make a documentary on the two gorillas. But Pongo appeared to be sick. But before the documentary has to be made, Pongo appears to be sick. He lost weight and had blood in his stool. So he was looking very lethargic. He had become very dull. Okay, he was not at all active, and he was not eating. He was eating nothing, and he had lost weight and had blood in his stool. So what happens is that he was very concerned. Gerald Durrell became very concerned about Pongo. He bought exotic fruits and watermelons for the gorilla, but he would eat. Since he was not eating, he decided to feed him with something very tasty. So the gorilla did not eat any exotic fruits, but he only ate the watermelon. But watermelons, we all know, do not have any nutritional value except for water. Okay, so soon afterwards, what happens is that Pongo is still weak. Okay, and the vet is not able to identify which disease he is suffering from. But then soon afterwards, he is discovered to be suffering from colitis, and he was given some antibiotic. Nandi and Pongo are separated from each other because the disease can spread, and Gerald puts the injection. Okay, and Durrell puts the injection on the gorilla, and slowly and gradually the gorilla shows progression from the disease. Durrell had to leave for France for a film shoot and was worried to leave the gorilla alone. Now Durrell has to leave for France for a film shoot, and he was worried to leave the gorilla alone. Pongo, however, recovered fast. Now what happens is that Pongo slowly started recovering quite faster. When he was in France, Gerald Durrell called the zoo several times for updates on gorilla's health, on Pongo's health. What happens is that he discovers that Npongo was getting finer and fitter day by day, and he had begun to eat well. He had begun to drink a lot of complan and eat a lot of fruits. On returning, he was happy to see him fine. Okay, so when he returns, he's very happy to see him fine. And then he concludes that it takes a huge effort to raise animals, especially gorillas, and it is no monkey business. So it takes a lot of time, to keep animals fit and fine. Okay, so these are the most important aspects of this story. And now let's discuss the themes of this story. First of all, the theme of animal love. It's clear to everybody how much our narrator, how much Gerald Durrell is fond of animals. Even when he does not have the money, he decides to buy the baby gorilla because he fears that they may get extinct. Also, he wants us all to be aware of what we can do as individuals, as human beings, to preserve wildlife. He raises the issue of extinction of animals, that animals are getting extinct at a very fast and very high rate, and we as human beings need to take steps and measures that can stop that from happening. Okay, so all of us need to cut out our carbon emissions, because global warming is actually causing a lot of animals to global warming and climate change is actually causing a lot of animals to disappear. So all of us at our individual levels need to take this lesson that we have to cut down on our carbon dioxide emissions, and that can happen when we use carpooling, avoid, use eco-friendly products. We can eat less non-vegetarian food. So these are some of the things that we can do to kind of preserve animals and wildlife. And then there is also the theme of animal extinction. There is a line in the narration that tells about how important it is to conserve, since there are 3 volumes of books, 3 fat volumes without even insects, which may get extinct. And then there is also the issue of the theme of sacrifice, that he's willing to sacrifice his life for, not his life, at least his money, and even in spite of being in a difficult situation, he's ready to help out those gorillas. So we should also feel love towards the animals. And this story is presented in a very humorous way. Okay, so it is actually meant for enjoyment. Okay, you have to enjoy the story. If you read it, it's written in a very simple language. It's very easy to read, and it almost shows the relationship between the two as that of a baby and his father. Okay, or maybe 2 brothers. It definitely is not a relationship like that of an owner and a thing. And Pongo is given his own separate, arena in which he functions. And Pongo's emotions are equal to that of a human being. His actions are described as just like that of a human being. It shows how much Gerald Durrell loves animals. Okay, he's describing him, he's writing an entire text on him, which means that he's very dear to him. Okay, various aspects of the life of the gorilla are highlighted, like what he does. He draws with the crayon like a child on the wall. It's written in the text, like he draws a map of Japan. So these are some of the things that you can use to analyze the story. It's a very fairly easy story, and it shows that animals do have feelings. Animals also need partners, just like human beings. Okay, just like marriage is important for us, they also need to be in company of other animals, and that is why he decides to purchase Nandi for him. Okay, so these are some of the themes that you can think about when you talk about the story A Gorilla in the Guest Room. I hope you liked my explanation. If you like it, please give a thumbs up, and please subscribe to my channel, and please share the video with your friends. Thank you so much for watching. If you have any questions, you can ask in the comment section below. Thank you guys, and bye bye.